Hi everyone. Sudhanshu, Sanjay,
Yep.
turn on your videos
Hi.
and your future self. Hi.
Right. I'm on. Good evening.
Good evening and a very good morning to Sudhanshu.
Good morning, Sudhanshu.
Thank you so much.
Thank you to both of you. Thank you so much for joining us today so that we can speak to our students here in India and help them navigate the uncertainty of the times that we're living in. And as we're all aware, the US has always been the world's largest economy while being home to the leading higher education institutions. It's always been the preferred destination for Indian students. But right now, our students are caught in the crosshairs of an upcoming presidential elections and a pandemic. And so we're all bearing the brunt of it. And many changes with recent regulations announced by ICE and temporary bans on H1Bs. So we look forward to hearing from both of you. And without further ado, may I ask you both to introduce yourself? Sudhanshu, could you share with everyone a little bit about yourself, please?
Sure. My name is Sudhanshu Kaushik. I was born and brought up in Alabama, as well as Haryana, where my parents currently live. I attended basically 1 year of state university at the University of Alabama at Birmingham, transferred to New York University, did my master's at a college in the UK, and then was in the process of completing or started my PhD at Columbia, and then took a leave of absence, eventually dropped out, and in the fall I'll be starting my MBA here. I am the founder of the North American Association of Indian Students, which is trying to create a community and mobilize Indian students of Indian nationality, but also being Indian American here in the United States. And we've been proactive with the COVID-19 crisis and helping people that were affected by that, specifically Indian students. And now we are mobilizing with Indian students and colleges and universities as the recent targets of the Trump administration on international students.
Thank you, Sudhanshu. Sanjay ji, could you please also share your introduction with our audience today?
Sure. Thank you, Aradhana, and thank you, Manya, for organizing such an event, because it is really important. Students are really concerned, and they want to know what is way forward. So a little brief on myself. I worked with the American Embassy in the visa section. I started with the non-immigrant visas, where we have all student visas and non-immigrant visas, H1s and L1s, and then went on to the immigrant visa section, and then the anti-fraud, and then became the visa specialist. And then I put in my papers and I started my own consulting firm. So I've been helping students now overall about 31 years. Relatively good experience. And I see a lot of students, and I've seen a lot of downs and ups, during the 2008 and the 9/11 and, various things. So even then, a lot of students had a lot of questions that what's going to happen on the H1, what's the student visa's way forward. So, I would really welcome students to participate and ask as many questions to, get themselves, acquainted with the current scenario and the future as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Sanjay ji. Sudhanshu, let's get started with you. Can you help us break down the impact of this ruling by ICE for our first year students who are looking or were hoping to start in fall, as well as for those who are already pursuing their degrees? What are their options? What's the impact, and what's your advice to them? And what's happening on the ground right now as we speak?
Okay, so there are different varieties where we can answer that. I think that this ruling doesn't necessarily, like it does, but it necessarily isn't targeted to those students who are essentially coming here in the fall that don't have a visa yet. And I know, that being said, it makes it a little bit more complicated because embassies are closed down until further notice. To my knowledge, the American embassies in India have not highlighted when they'll be opening up. I think Sanjay, you can better question that or answer that. But at the same time, what's happened is that it truly depends not necessarily on when you're coming or if you're coming, but your university. right? And that's, I think, how we need to be reframing and kind of rethinking about these questions when we ask who is affected and who isn't. The Trump administration, ICE, basically, which is the Immigrant Enforcement Agency, has established a directive that establishes a guideline for sure, right? And that guideline, as you've heard, restricts Indian students from studying at certain different variations. But those restrictions, when implemented, from our understanding and from the understanding of lawyers here who we've been working with, it's the onus on the university, right? So the university itself has that decision in their hand to ensure whether you will be affected or not. And what I mean by that is that if it fits into the 3 guidelines that ICE has given us and everyone through their press release or their internal memo. By the way, that's the only directive or information available on this directive. They have not clarified any further other than the 1.5-page internal memo and the press release. And if it fits within those 3 objectives, taking into contextual and past legal precedent, it is up to the university to kind of break down if you can or can't come. They can offer, for example, hybrid situations, which means that you'll be attending in-person and online classes. They could possibly offer, for example, UC schools are doing a hybrid situation where they're offering a 1-credit class that meets technically once a month to qualify into standards of that hybrid model that ICE has given. So I want to kind of, there's a lot of false information where it's like, okay, there's this staunching just guideline that it has been given, but it's actually on the onus of the university. And the universities are standing up. You asked what the ground situation was. The ground situation is the fact that a lot of students, not just Indian students, a lot of international students are standing up. You saw and probably heard that Harvard and MIT had sued, but in the past 2.5 days, what's happened is that universities have filed an amicus brief. Now, that's a really complicated way of saying that they support the case that's going in and will give any supporting information and documentation that they can give. But other schools are directly also suing. So now you have about a couple of dozen schools that are on the list. We expect that list to go further. And on top of that, you have states that are suing. Now, that's the amount, that's the pressure that has been, given to the states, but also to the universities from students, from alumni, from parents of students, to ensure that they can do everything they can to fight this directive. Whether it succeeds or not is still up to, well, right now, one judge to put a restraining order or not. But there's a lot of pressure being mounted. And regardless of when this decision takes place, because it's in a docket, it'll take its due time. And even if it is accepted within this, there are a lot of legal remedies that will be coming up. So I think people are concerned for sure because it immediately affects them. And when I say immediately, summer too. So we've had instances where fall semester, even before, there are, in the US collegiate system, in the summer bracket, you have basically summer 1 and summer 2 where you can take classes. Summer 2 classes have been impacted by this, by the way. So when we think about immediate effects, they are immediate, but hopefully in the longer term, justice will prevail and we'll be able to get back to normal. But that's we'll see how soon that happens.
Okay, so to break it down and make it really specific and simple, what is your advice to students who have a valid admit from a US school or someone who's already continuing their classes? Should they stay in touch with their international student office to figure out what's going on, what courses they should take, how to keep their status valid, invalid, etc.?
Okay, so one of the biggest things I can say, and we've been saying to everyone, is don't change your plans. Act as if everything is normal. A lot of people just heard the news, changed their plans, deferred, etc. Don't do that. we don't know what's going to happen. In a week, it could change. In 2 weeks, it could change. In 3 days, it could change depending on the docket and depending on the ruling. So what we need to be, we need to first see what the legal ramifications are. So that's my first advice. The second thing you do is, as a student, you keep constant pressure on the university. Inundate them with emails. Ensure that you're speaking with them directly as well, telling how much this affects you and how they need to be doing everything in their hand. As an international student, you cannot approach, like, as for example, your representatives here in the United States, the legislative branch, they can't do much regardless because this is an executive directive underneath the executive branch. But regardless, as an international student, you don't really have much say within the representatives. But what you can keep constantly doing is mounting pressure on the university to sue. We've seen this before. I'm not sure if you're all familiar with the Muslim ban that happened here in the United States. And the way that was basically negated is that universities, including states, did exactly what they did. They inundated the Justice Department. They kept filing and filing and filing and filing. And they got a restraining order and staying order in some places at that instance as well. And those cases are still going on, by the way. So what I would say is that everyone needs to stick to their plans and constantly keep ensuring that if they have an admit letter and plan on going to a university, to keep pressurizing them to sue and to not let this slide.
And of course, while the universities have taken all legal recourse and will eventually take it, but in the eventuality that this may take longer and fall semester may start, the students do have to enroll for their courses and decide which courses they're taking online and which ones they're taking on campus, and whether they're flying back and whether the consulate is open. And right now, as you said, we don't have any information. How do they figure out how to handle that? Because there's a lot of information that we're hearing from universities as well as to how they're coming up with very creative, innovative solutions, how they're offering in-country, in-residence options as well with their partner schools. And I know this is going to be different for different schools, but what would, any specific insights on this that you want to share with students?
I don't want to mislead anyone because I think that this is so specific to universities. For example, my previous universities all have different plans that they're doing. So for example, NYU has currently even changing its registrar of classes so they can kind of differentiate. NYU CERN is teaming up with a few IIMs to offer and just renting out buildings within Bangalore and Delhi to offer classes for MBA students. And so there's just a variety of different ways that really people and universities are kind of adapting to the situation. And it's also evolving. We are very early on. This news is 3 days old, right? It is only, at least until next week, we'll figure out what the specific response and how universities, in terms of if this goes on, how will they kind of mediate this and go forward. And I don't want to mislead anyone. The only thing that I can say is that keep in constant communication with your university that you're attending. And you'll be able, and obviously they're being really proactive in this when they're offering a variety level of different classes and courses. And I, will go on to say that it's in the best interest. The universities in this instance are on your side. Your side meaning that they also want your tuition, but they will do everything proactively to keep you there. And they will make sure that they make the most comfortable experience for you as well, within their legal realm, right? So I would just keep mounting pressure and understand that they will be giving you updates as soon as possible. We've spoken to a lot of universities that are just overwhelmed right now. The student offices, the administration offices, they're fighting a legal battle, but they're also fighting a battle of trying to, ensure that they're giving out as much information that they have with students and fighting that kind of like information battle as well, because these universities don't have much information to go off of either. Everyone here is going off the directive of those 2 pages, but these guidelines are applicable to 1,000,000+ students in 1,000,000 different ways. I could be a, senior that needs, only 8 credits to graduate or 6 credits to graduate. What am I supposed to do? Or I could be someone that's a freshman that still hasn't had a visa stamped, or I need a different I-20. I've been in India too long. So again, everyone is in that same situation.
Yeah. Thank you, Sudhanshu. Yes, Sanjay, could you shed some light as well, specifically on the impact of this on those who have valid F1 visas and have I-20s, and how will this new regulation impact their visa status? Is there something that they should be doing proactively?
Right. So like Sudhanshu already mentioned that, it is very important for the students to be in touch with the DSO in their universities, because it is going to be very university specific. So universities have to upload whether they're going on a hybrid program or whatever the program that they're doing, and the student is an active student, they have to keep updating the service record so that student stays active, whether he's in the US or outside the US. Usually what happens is that if a student is outside the US for 5 months and more, then his visa status becomes invalidated. But under the COVID-19 circumstances, if the university is updating the service record saying that he's active, he can actually go back and join his classes. 2 things that I wanted to bring up with Sudhanshu was, Sudhanshu, this executive order is temporary. It's only for the COVID-19, or will that extend?
So here's what we know. This directive right now is not for COVID-19. The directive they had placed in end of March, I would say, or beginning of March, was the directive that was for COVID-19 pandemic. This is, I can't say if it's a permanent, but there was no language to say it was a temporary directive by any means, nor does it say that in any of their official language, to my understanding. And if you look at the case that Harvard and MIT have given, I think it's on the 2nd or 3rd page where they give, in fact, that this directive comes after the temporary restriction or uplifting of the restrictions that the immigration services provided at the beginning of March, or some, the wording is, I'm not, don't quote me on that. So to our understanding, they have stopped the actual temporary lifting of restrictions that they had given in March. Does that make sense?
Oh.
And placed it with this new directive. Sorry, Aradhana.
So not very clear, Sudhanshu. Can you simplify that?
Okay, so in any normal circumstances, you have a regulation that states that any international student can only take 3 credits or 1 class. That translates to 1 class. If you have 1.5, then 2 classes worth of credits at any given year online, right? In March, as universities shut down, everything went AWOL. The immigration services came out in, I think, the middle of March, please correct me on the dates, to lift that restriction and said this is a temporary restriction on the online classes. So any international student could take more, and that is how people graduated. That is how people have been actually doing summer courses, and that is how they intended to do so with that temporary restriction, because people didn't think it would be lifted, and that's the assumption everyone was going off of in the fall. Now they have come with this update to that prior uplifting of the restriction, saying that that these are the new measures going forward. So I hope it's not permanent, but it does. The language doesn't show that this is a temporary restriction, and that's what the lawyers are saying.
All right, so this could also mean one thing, that there could be a lot of universities in the US which are only online, right? They don't have in-person classes, right? So that could be a restriction on them as well. So it's more towards a university rather than on a student, right?
Again, the onus on this that we're realizing every single day is on the universities.
Right.
They want them to open up. They want them to proactively be contributing, and they want, there are political agendas attached to this, and the idea of opening the country back up. this is just part and parcel of that, without understanding the true expenses to international students.
So what I can understand, Radna, is that the students over here and in the US should be in a comfort zone, saying that the onus is on the university rather than on them. If the university says that you can come into the university and study, so they're good to go and study, right?
Great. So to summarize, our advice to students right now on this regulation is don't drop your plans, stay in very close touch with your university. They will be there to support you to figure something out. And as far as updating their visa status as well, on SEVIS, the onus lies on the university to issue them either a new I-20 or update their SEVIS records as their status stands. Correct, Sanjay ji?
Correct. Absolutely. They should.
Let's change tracks a little bit and move on to the temporary ban which had come through a few weeks ago on the H1B. And as we know that several of our students look forward to graduating from the United States, getting some work experience on their CPT, OPT, and then converting that into an H1B. So this has been a real dampener for them. And again, we understand that this is politically motivated and a fallout of the pandemic as well. But how does this impact, Sanjay ji, our students? So what does this mean, this temporary ban for those who are currently on their OPT, CPT? Does that mean that they'll have to leave the United States right away? What about students who just graduated or who are about to graduate? Can you just give us some scenarios with specifics so students understand how they're placed?
Okay, so if I talk about the H1, like you correctly mentioned that, current situation of COVID-19 and the elections right in the corners. So there are a lot of things which are happening within the US itself. But if I look at in the essence, the lottery for H1Bs usually are, or they can file it until the March of the next year. And then in April, the lotteries would come up. So even if this ban is till December, the organizations or the institute where the students are currently doing their OPT still have a lot of time to file for the H1. It's not that the ban is currently for until December 31st. In January, I'm sure the lawyers and the organizations are working overtime to complete the documentation and file them as soon as January, they hit January, because April is the time when the lotteries would come up. I saw this in 2008 and even post 9/11. If you look at the essence, nothing has actually changed. It is just that it's kind of a pause button currently for students, so they should not be in a panic mode, because they have a lot of time to file the H1s, and H1s would be filed. So there is a difference between what the government says and what the organizations like Yahoo or a Google or a Microsoft would need. They're also fighting and saying that we want to increase the numbers, we want to have more H1Bs. So currently they're also working overtime and working with the government to get this thing ban lifted. And in essence, starting January until March, they have a lot of time to file for the H1s. Now, even for the OPT, the DHS, the Department of Homeland Security, is working on a model where if a student is outside the US and if he's working remotely, and if the employee-employer relationship is maintained, that OPT would be counted. And when they go back, they could actually eventually start doing their OPT as well. Aradhana.
Thank you, Sanjay ji. So in essence, you're saying again, don't drop any plans, nothing gets impacted. This is just a temporary cloud which is going to blow over, particularly once the results of the presidential elections in November are known to all. And in any case, the process doesn't begin until next year, March and April. So those who were eligible to apply for an H1B are not affected. Those who are in the process of graduating and moving towards their CPT and OPT in any case are not impacted by this.
Correct.
And so all is well for now.
Right. Again, we go back to the same thing. They have to be in touch with the university. The university DSO office has to keep updating that their student records are active. As long as they're active, they're good.
And does taking classes online because of the pandemic affect their OPT and CPT status?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't, in essence,
okay.
because they would be considering that as under the emergency, and they would be taking that as online classes as long as they are maintaining their grades, and they are in active, student line, they're good to go.
Okay, great.
Right.
Okay, and Sanjay ji, any insights on when the consulates may open physically, and is there anything that a student can do to pre-apply for a visa during this lockdown phase?
Correct. So what I've been suggesting to students is that, they should at least complete the process, as in fill the DS-160, create their profile, pay the visa application fees, and whatever date is available, current date available is October, mid-October. They should book those dates for two reasons. One, that as soon as the embassy opens up, they would have the opportunity to reschedule their appointments, get early dates, request for an emergency appointment, get an expedited appointment as and when the embassy opens up. Second is whenever the embassy opens up, let's say that, if this season passes by without the embassy opening up and they go into the spring session, they could always show their intent, because the intent is very important for a student to show during his interview, that his intentions were to go and study in the US. He had pre-booked, and because of the embassy and things were not in his control, so he could not make to the interview. But it's very important that the students should complete the process, the minimum at least, filling the DS-160, creating their profile, scheduling the interviews. It's really important for them to show their intent.
So if my classes are to start in August or early September, as of now, it seems unlikely that the consulate will open in time for me to get a visa. But your advice is still that we go ahead and take all appointments and fill all forms, so that in the eventuality, whenever the consulate opens, it gives us a leg up in terms of our chances of getting a visa, to show that we had an intent, whether it's to start physical classes in fall or to start physical classes in winter.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Spot on. They should be doing this.
And if students ask that, what if I were to take classes in fall, because I'm an incoming student, first year student, and my visa may get rejected for winter. Is that a possibility to your mind?
Look, if you talk about, the normal circumstances, the visa officers are looking at the intentions. When I say intentions, so that, whether a student who wants to go and study in the US, does he have clear intentions to go and study there? And I have a famous dialogue that I keep telling everyone. There are two kinds of students. One, those who want to go to the US, and one, those who want to go and study in the US. There's a difference. You know it, I know it, and the visa officers also know it. So what is the difference? The difference is that the student who wants to go and study in the US would have taken his SATs, GREs, the GMAT, the TOEFL. He would have applied to various colleges. He would have chosen a college based on that would improve on his skill sets, right? And then when he's taking his online classes, he's already shown his intent that he wants to study. And when he goes in for his visa interview, his chances of getting a visa are already a notch up, because he's already invested that his intent to go and study there, and he's shown that he is ready to take those classes, even off campus, even in India. So the intent is very, very, very important when a person goes in for his visa interview. And then of course, his financial capabilities, because he's already paid the fees, that shows also clearly that, the family and the student has shown his intent to study, paid the fees. And then eventually when he goes for his visa interview, he would still have time to understand what's happening in India and how he can connect his education and his skill set that would really improve his employability once he graduates. So I think it's important that the student should maintain the plan of showing their intent by filling out the visa forms, taking the visa appointments. If the embassy doesn't open up, taking the online classes, and then eventually going in for the visa interviews, when they actually go in. So it's going to be a huge advantage for the students. For sure.
Sanjay, one of our students from the audience has a very specific question, that even to enroll for an online class, they needed to take a student loan. Mm-hmm. And multiple banks have told them that they need an approved visa to get that loan. And so how do they get out of this?
Well, it's again between the student and the bank, because if the embassy opens up and if they issue the visa, that means everything is fine. Unfortunately, they have to figure out, all the banks, they have to figure out if a student is actually committed in studying, So
So you're
that's
saying banks will make an exception to grant loans in this pandemic, given that the student may not have a visa because they realize the situation at hand.
I mean, because if the embassy was open, so they would be flying out. The embassies would open up once everything normalizes, and they would start giving visas. So I'm sure the banks would definitely have that kind of exception. They have to figure it out with the banks for sure. Aradhana.
Yes. We have a lot of questions coming in from the audience, and so I was trying to now filter some of the critical questions, and then we can come back to our discussion. So just bear with me. I'm going to read out the specific question. If I defer my admit to a future intake, I think we covered this. Will there be any problem in issuance of visa? Sanjay ji?
I mean, so this question means too, defer means that he's not taking classes and then he's going to defer it to the next session.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah. So that could be, it all depends, if he's going to a good university, if the university is credible, if it matches his, his background to go and study and improve on his skill sets, so I don't see an issue, Like I said, intent is really important. First is, like I said, even if he is going to defer it for the next session, at least he should commit this year to complete his visa process, as in filling the visa forms and creating his profile. The visa fees and the service is valid for 1 year. So he can use the same thing next year when he goes in. Right? So it's important that he commits now at least.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sudhanshu, any advice from your end on students applying for fall 2021? Should students still stick with their plans and ignore all this negativity that has been clouding the US? Why is the US still an attractive destination? Is the anti-China sentiment going to help the Indian student applicant for next year?
So there are a variety of ways. I don't think the anti-China sentiment has any kind of implications for university students and their applications to universities. I think that is a political kind of equation where universities want the Chinese money, so it's going to come. Obviously, depending on whether or not how the back and forth of student visas will go. That being said, I think that there will be a significant rush to apply for fall of 2021. You have seen a lot of people defer their admission or withdraw from schools, or a variety of basically implications that all tend to say that fall 2021 will see a rush in applications or the movement and mobility. I can't say, and give general advice and say this is the better decision. What I think that all of you need to understand is where they are right now. Do you think that will you have to reapply to a university if you defer? Because some universities are not giving deferrals in some cases. You also need to understand that if you are granted a deferral, is it worth it to stay an entire year or try to come back in January of 2021? You then need to take into equation that, with this gap year of sorts that has been forced upon you, will you be able to do something productive that might increase your chances to get into a better, larger university in fall of 2021 too? So I think that this is very subjective to the person. What I would recommend is take this as an opportunity, because that's what we can do at this point, and assess your intent in terms of which school you want to go to if you think you have a better shot in other schools, and to commit. If you're happy with that, then commit. I think things will turn back to normal. I think that in our lifetime, and I might be wrong, the US will always be a preferred higher education destination. And that's because of the economic implications, but the institutions themselves. This is easily a multi-trillion-dollar economy in that aspect, or business of all the universities combined. It won't just go away that easily. Will there be changes? Yes, but there will be a plethora of students still applying, still trying to get in and still get that degree and still learn. What I would just say is take a deep breath. Things are slow right now because of the lack of information and uncertainty. They will give you the measures, whether it goes one way or the other, they will adapt to you. It's hard to say right now because some schools have not been constantly updating, and a big thing is about tuition and remittance, and I completely get that. But they're also understanding of that. You have to convey to them what's happening, and they will understand as long as you're able to put your case forward. Those are, I'm sorry, I know that's a very generic piece of advice, but that's the best we can give when the implications we know, the surrounding context we have is also very generic and very contextual to the applicant.
Right. And internships will not get impacted if students are taking online classes, correct, for next summer? I don't see a connect, but some of our students...
Yeah. So, look, I hate to say one negative thing, but this is going to, we're just getting started in terms of political election rhetoric, right? November is the elections. You're going to have a few other directives placed, and they might not stand, right? That's also, you have to understand that this is not, that means, first of all, it's only until January, technically. If something stands, then the new administration can change it. But also, this isn't, we have to understand that you might hear in the next couple of weeks something about OPT statuses being, affected as well, which we think is very, very likely. But please understand that while this might come, you have to understand this revolves around the election and domestic politics, not necessarily the path forward of, hopefully not the path forward of US immigration, because they too understand the implications and value of international students coming back and forth. When you have over $40 billion to contribute to the national economy just by Indian students alone is what or Indian H1B and students, or that's the statistic that, we've heard. So I would say that we just need to be mindful of that, and that, you might hear things taking place, but they will soon get back to normal, in my opinion, and the opinion of other people. It's it's an uncomfortable, it's something that's unprecedented. We have never been in a situation, where immigrant students have been the target of political agendas, right? It's never been, yes, immigration has been affected before, but student immigration hasn't. So this is unprecedented territory that we're all dealing with. And hopefully it's something that won't stick.
Absolutely.
So Aradhana, I'm sorry, I'll add two things over here. One is that thankfully we are still living in democracy, both countries, right? Right, Sudhanshu?
I'm kidding. Yes.
Right, that's one thing. So that's the reason we see MIT and Harvard going in and suing the government. The other thing is, like, when we talk about visa policies, so visa policies are based on reciprocity between two countries. To change the visa policy as a policy would require the other country to also agree and come in. So there are a lot of things which goes into it. It's just not that one country, if the H1 ban is there, so the other country may also react. So there's a reciprocity which goes in. So what I see is, like, my personal view, all these things are just temporary, and I'm sure, this is going to fade away after a while, because a lot of things are riding, because, we've got offices of international MNCs here, we've got offices there. There's a lot of business which keeps happening between two countries. People go back and forth. India also issues a lot of visas to, expats, and vice versa. So there are a lot of things which goes into the reciprocity and to government. So, I think it's just the end zone that we're in.
This is an incredibly crucial point, Sanjay. What you brought up, and I think everyone needs to really understand this as well and take their own initiative. Yesterday, NAAIS, the organization that I run, ran a webinar with three basically lawyers from the South Asia Bar Association trying to basically unpack what this means for all Indian students that are here, that are studying. And the three takeaways that they had, one was stay calm. The second was keep in constant touch and pressurize your university. Force them to sue, force them to be updated. Just do not stop that contact. If you send one mail, send another, right? Don't shy away from this, right? The third thing that they said that I don't think people are doing at all because of the political implications in our home country is that they're not corresponding with their own government. The Indian government has not taken any direct stance about this that's more than lip service. And exactly what you said, visa statuses have implications on both countries, regardless of your visa. And both are at stake here. So the Indian government can take a more significant step rather than just, oh, we are assessing the information, which is all that they've done. So I 100% think that as much, and I'm sorry that we didn't, I didn't say this beforehand, but Sanjay, you brought this up. If you're talking to your university, it is your duty to also hit up your representatives in your local constituency, so your MP or your administration, whoever it is, to make this a larger issue back home. The MEA, the Ministry of External Affairs, can also have its own ramifications if it chooses to do so, or responses, other than just bringing the issue up, which is what they've done. They cannot take this. I mean, as Indian students, and we have great relationships with the reciprocity country. We need to be proactive in this. We can't be just, oh, we're trying to figure it out. There needs to be pressure mounting. And the only way pressure is going to mount is if students that are on this webinar directly do those two things: contact their university and then contact their representatives, contact their administration in their own country. And it seems like people will easily say that, this doesn't make sense. What does my local MP have anything to do with this? It has everything to do with it. Pressure amounts.
Right.
Yeah.
Aradhana.
Yes. Very, very interesting perspectives. Thank you to you both for bringing that up. I think some of the students are still very perturbed with the specifics around some of this. So I'm going to read out the question verbatim. That some of the Ivy Leagues have specifically mentioned that F1 students will not be eligible for CPT or an internship if the classes are online. Is that true? Whichever one of the two wants to answer it. And also, usually the incoming fall students require minimum 9 months for being eligible to apply for internships in summer. So will doing an online semester in fall impact that negatively?
I think, sorry.
Okay, so what I understand is currently the Department of Homeland Security is trying to draft or redraft something for the CPT and OPT. And I believe that, in case if they're doing the online classes, they're going to make an exception for this year, because that's what I read the last, that the Department of Homeland Security, the DHS, is currently working on this format, because there are a lot of questions coming up. Even the universities have started writing to the ISIS and the Department of Homeland Security. It should soon be coming in with a new directive. And what I believe is, again, it should not impact, but then we have to wait until the Department of Homeland Security comes up with the clear directives. Sudhanshu, you want to add on something on this?
No, I think you know best. And I think it's a evolving situation. That's what I was going to say.
Yes, at this point of time. Aradhana.
I think we've covered a lot of the questions. I know there are more specific individual questions coming up, but I believe we've covered the general flow of questions broadly.
So a couple of things so what I can also read over here is that students are a little concerned about when the embassy will open up, and how long is the DS-160 valid for, So the DS-160, once you file and submit, it's valid. But if you do not submit your DS-160 within 30 days, it expires. So what I'm telling you is, when you start filling your DS-160, you have to sign and submit within 30 days, otherwise it expires. Once you fill it up and sign and submit, it's there forever. In fact, it's there for 99 years in the system. You can retrieve it any point of time.
Super, thank you. Sanjay, there are several other very specific visa-related questions. If you'd like to look at the chat and pick up some, since we still have any that we've not already answered, because we do have a few minutes still left.
Next year, student of great job doing opinion experts. Great if spent session students planning to apply for fall 21. Okay. I don't have my open way, but would be taking another regular course load. So most of them we've covered,
Yes, exactly. I believe that's why we've been sifting through the questions. There are several questions, but I believe we've covered most of those
Right.
very specifically as well.
Right. Yeah.
Any closing remarks from either of you before we conclude our session for today?
So what I would, suggest students is that right in the beginning, like Aradhana had started off saying that US is the melting pot. Students over the years have gone and, benefited from the US education. This is just a very unusual, circumstance that we all are in, never seen this in our life. So just hold on, keep communicating with your universities. If you're a regular student there, be in touch with your DSO. If you're a student who wants to apply for their visas, start your DS-160, fill your DS-160 and of course pay the visa application fees and wait for the embassy to open up. If you have the option of doing the online classes, might as well consider that doing, because it would really help you. I can only wish them all the best and let this pandemic get over. We've learned a lot from this. Keep doing this. All the best. Aradhana.
Thank you, Sanjay. Sudhanshu?
Yeah, I'd just like to echo the thoughts. What we've discussed and what truly is the sentiment that we should all be considering is that other than visa-specific questions, which are obviously under the purview of the governments, et cetera, when it comes to a lot of these subjective, university-centric questions, concerns that you have, understand that this is not your situation, it's everyone's situation. And they are 100% inundated with messages of people almost like you in their similar situations, and they will be working on a go around. I would not, at all expect anything different than universities trying to adapt to student concerns. Will it be an inconvenience right now? Yes. Will it be ideal? Probably not. But eventually, there will be updates. You will have, a workaround for you, and they will try their level best to keep you within their university system and structure, right? And they will constantly promote that. So just, be mindful of that. I've seen a lot of questions on optional tests, which some courses have, or some universities have done. I've seen, what happens to this. The university will try its level best to prescribe a mandate that, adjusts to you and adjusts to the situation. Please be, understanding of that, and expect these changes to occur, but we just have to be patient about it. People are overwhelmed right now. So please don't stress. Test optional is a very big thing, apparently. Please don't stress and don't worry. You will be receiving updates as they come and go. And just, again, keep mounting pressure. We're doing it here in the United States, but it's up to you as well as incoming students, as future students, to put pressure on the universities and to put pressure on your local administration too.
Yes, I saw that someone was putting pressure on us to answer the question. But the reason we didn't take it up very specifically in this webinar as well is because next week we have another panel discussion with the admissions officers of 5 or 6 eminent US universities, and we can then get to hear from them firsthand, the updates on loans and visa status and course structures and hybrid and test optional and deferment, etc., etc. So it's best to hear from the universities themselves, and we wanted a different conversation here today with Sanjay and Sudhanshu, and I'd like to conclude by really thanking them for taking out the time. And we wish all of our students here all the very best. Stay calm and stay safe, and thank you.
Thank you, Sudhanshu. Thanks.
Take care.
Guys.
Thanks, Radna. Thanks. Take care. Bye-bye.